I wanted to come on today and talk about Sony's two forgotten handhelds, the Xperia Play cell phone and the PSP Go. And I think these two handhelds have a lot in common. Obviously, they share similar mechanics as to how you open them. As you can see, they have these nice flip devices with compact but very good controls. But it just doesn't end there. These are two platforms that, in a certain sense, have gotten better with age. And I want to explain that here in the video. Alright, I'm going to start with the Xperia Play Phone. Of course, it's branded here Sony Ericsson. This is an AT&T model from about 2011, perhaps 2012. It might be the second variant that they came out with here. But it was kind of a short-lived phone that was really built to game, as you saw with the very good control pad underneath. So it was a traditional Android phone. I can't remember what version of Android it ran, but you could sort of close that, and you had your typical phone with the apps. It's a little slow these days, kind of scrolling through. And it came pre-installed with a couple of games. It's hard to see on here, but you have Dungeon Defenders, Crash Bandicoot, Asphalt 6, and a couple of others. So Sony, I saw this in a train station in Dresden when I was traveling. I said this would really be a cool phone to have. And I picked it up maybe 6 months or a year later, and it really, really was. Control pad here is good. Of course, you have the kind of classic PlayStation portable controls, start, select, and the Android menu button. The downfall, though, were these touch-sensitive analog sticks, or at least that's what they called them, but these were really, really bad. So the games built for the phone that took advantage of them were particularly poor, and I'll show that in a little bit. But we close this here. I don't know why this is not going into portrait mode, but whatever. Sony had its own marketplace, and we will launch that here, the Xperia Play Marketplace. And this really was sort of all the games that you could play. A lot of them were Asphalt. I think that was a Gameloft game, so I guess a lot of Gameloft games, some SNK as we can see. But that was pretty much it as far as the games that you could purchase from Sony's store. Now, I did go to see if I could still purchase these, and it has been completely shut down. So here we have the launch interface, and I'm going to show you Asphalt here, kind of give you an idea of what the graphics are like, so we will launch that. So I'm going to control this with the digital, or the, whatever you want to call this, touch-sensitive pad. And you can see the problem. You really have to sort of scratch on it almost to get it to respond. And it's just terrible controls. Now, admittedly, this phone is 7 years old, so it's probably not as smooth and accurate as it was, but I just never remember it being that good. You had to keep your thumb in the center of these little metal centers, and then it would just sort of track your movement off the center. And as you can see, it's pretty bad. So usually a lot of the time I would just use the control pad here. But as you can see, the graphics, not bad. So here is Crash Bandicoot, and this may be a PlayStation version. In fact, it had the PlayStation load screen when I fired it up. And it's playable. These are, I would say, not bad graphics. 2011 on a phone. I think it was a reasonable effort by Sony here. I just want to touch on the build quality of the phone. It was a pretty rugged phone. This open and close mechanism worked really, really well. And when you're playing games that take advantage of the normal controls, they're absolutely fine. If you see on the back here, they have the Shoulder buttons, speakers on the back. Speakers are not bad. The case is plasticky, and there's a little crack after a couple years of use, but overall, it was a solid phone. Now, what I really like about the phone, however, is that it ran emulators, Android emulators. So what I was able to ultimately do with this phone is travel around, again, 2011, 2012, with my entire gaming childhood here on the phone. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So here we have PC Engine emulation. And being a PC Engine person growing up, it's going to go down here to Zonk. So you can see the ability to play these on the go, these terrific games, was something that I think was fairly new, and to this day, so I'm getting destroyed here with this setup, to this day, this is the best way to play emulation on the go. Of course, you can have a PSP, you know, with mods and stuff like that, but as far as on a cell phone, because you have this terrific quality screen, bright, colorful, and you have solid controls. So now we have Sonic 2. As you can see, pretty good. My gaming skills, at least with this recording setup, you're not going to see me at my best, but, you know, input lag is not terribly noticeable. In fact, I would say if you compare it to something like the Ouya, it is, you have less input lag on here. The sound over the years has taken a dive. I think it could be the speakers, but I don't know. There's something with the sound where it's just not as crisp as it once was, in my opinion. But, you know, basically I have all the emulators I would ever want. I basically have my whole video game collection on here, and I can play it on the go. And like I said, the screen is held up nicely. The controls are extremely slick. You know, as far as these buttons, they're some of the best portable gaming buttons that I've seen. I mean, they almost feel better than the original PlayStation portable, and in fact, the PSP Go. So, as an emulation box, you can see this is running. I found this was in the bottom of my closet. Hadn't been turned on, I would say, in 4 or 5 years. And yet, hasn't missed a beat, charged right up, and the controls are as wonderful as ever. And now we have the PlayStation Portable Go version. This is the PSP version that did not take the UMD discs. Everything had to be purchased from Sony's PlayStation Network store for the device. And in a lot of ways, kind of the precursor to the digital distribution that occurs today. But in 2011, 2012, when this came out, not a popular situation. And in fact, I got it as a gift, as a Christmas gift. It was not something I probably would have picked up on my own. And I didn't really play many games for it. In fact, I think the only 4 or 5 games that I had for this device were the Sony apology games. Remember, they had a sort of breach of the PlayStation Network. Then you could get, you know, a couple games for the PlayStation 3 and a couple games for the PSP. And that's really all I picked up on here. But it's a nice device. Again, this mechanism that Sony designed is beautiful. It's lasted well. You know, it's functioned well. It's lasted over the years. And the controls, not as good as the Xperia Play Phone, but pretty good. Especially, again, with the D-pad and the buttons. The analog stick leaves... I mean, it's perfectly functional in games that require it, but it doesn't feel great, and it leaves a lot to be desired. Again, on the back, you have your sort of typical PSP buttons, volume, screen brightness, and then you have the shoulder pads. Now, or the shoulder buttons. Now, one of the problems that I have with this is that if you have big hands, they get a little cramped, and if you're laying in bed, you know, you really are sort of cramped playing this. and at least in my case, your hands go numb after a while. There's some, actually, I don't know if you can see this, but some discoloration. These were kind of clear strips, kind of grippy strips on the back, and I want to say that the heat generated by the device kind of singed the glue, either that or dust got in there, and I don't. Again, the thumb pad here is a little discolored from years of use, but overall it's a nice piece of hardware. Now, where does it excel today? I said both of these systems, in a sense, got better over the years. Well, I discovered, let me see where this is. Nope, those are my old games. This firmware, and what this allowed me to do, for the longest time you could not put custom firmware on here, but this Pro C firmware, and there are a couple different versions. I had to use the Flasher version, but what this allowed you to do, or at least allowed me to do, was digitize my entire UMD collection. And while I don't have enough space to put every game on here, to load up 10, 15 games that I want to play, and really discover, in a sense, for the first time, my PSP collection. I bought a lot of PSP RPGs sort of at the end of the life cycle of the PSP, and I never got around to playing them just because it was kind of a pain in the neck to use the UMDs with my original PSP, and it just felt slow and clunky with the load times. To me, at least for my subjective perception, the load times are a lot quicker. And again, I can have, my whole collection of games on here. You can see a couple on that. One is the internal memory, the other is, I guess this is the SD card. But, these are the games that I got initially, and then digitized, like this Grown Lancer game. Purchased it, never played it. Now I can play it on here with, the suspended sleep states and everything like that. It just makes your PSP collection more accessible and more fun to play. So a lot of my mobile gaming is actually rediscovering the games that I bought 10, 12 years ago on the PSP. So from that perspective, PSP Go is an excellent choice. Now, obviously, if you have a regular PSP, you can do pretty much the same thing. You can mod it and play ISO files, and that's fine. But for me, this particular firmware is basically foolproof, it's easy, and it has been absolutely flawless. So there you have it, the forgotten Sony handhelds. Two handhelds that I really think deserve a second look. PSP Go, obviously if you're interested in digitizing your UMD collection, you want a little smaller form factor than the original PSP. It's a nice option. And then a used Xperia Play Phone, nice portable emulation device, good controls, and it gives you the ability, something that, again, a regular phone or a modern phone can't do. Sure, you can put emulators on a modern phone, but you can't have this classic control layout and really play through your entire gaming youth on the go in one compact device. So I highly recommend the Xperia Play if you are interested in taking your games on the road.